Hi everyone, it's Kathleen from Babylist here. I always like to start our lives by saying who we are, who's Babylist. We're a universal baby registry that lets you add any item from any store all into one awesome registry so you can get exactly what you want, what you need from any store on the web, even in person. You can also add fun things like hand-me-down clothing if you're looking to be a little bit earth-friendly. You can add gift cards. You can add ask for people to help you walk your dog. All kinds of things. So Babylist helps you get what you really need for your baby. Today we're so excited to have Erica Chitty from Loom join us to talk about what really happens to your body after birth. I see her in the request, so I'm gonna go live with Erica. Hi, the best registry, thank you, of REXO. We love Babylist and we work really hard on it for you. Hey Erica!
Hi, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. I gave a very brief intro to our audience, to you, but I'd love to hear it in your words. Erica, who are you?
Well, Kathleen, thank you for the intro. It's so nice to see your face. I love seeing your face. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Loom. We're a digital platform that helps women and people optimize their sexual and reproductive well-being. And I was a doula for many, many years, working in birth and postpartum and along the entire sexual reproductive health spectrum. I'm also the author of Nurture, a book that some folks on here maybe are reading, have read, or have passed on to someone else. And I am so excited about this amazing partnership we have between Babylist and Loom of just sharing information, because I think, as you said, like, Babylist is a place where you can register anything that you need. I love that you can register hand-me-downs now. It's so great. And Loom right now, our first program that we are offering is all about pregnancy and postpartum. So it's really helping people that are in this exact time, after they're done with their registry, or continuing to add things to it, to figure out how to take care of their body and how to take care of their minds moving through such a transformative experience.
Of course, because it's not just about getting ready for baby. It's about what's happening to you, and you're going through such a big transformation. And in that time when you're thinking about, what do I need to get for baby? Also, don't forget to think about yourself and how your body, your emotions, your role in this world is going to change. And Loom is really here to help us with that part of the experience. So we're so glad to be here with you. I just want to add, follow Loom HQ if you aren't already. And also we will add the link to the birth and postpartum class that Erica mentioned, that is available on Loom now. Such a great step-by-step experience to walk you through everything you need to know to help you feel better prepared to bring a baby into this world and really take care of yourself as well. So yeah, all right. So let's see. We're here today to talk about, when we were brainstorming, what is the next live we should do? We really thought back to when we asked random questions on Instagram, what kind of gets people really fired up with, I have so many questions. And it was definitely what is going to happen to my body after I give birth. So Erica wrote a great piece on Babylist that you can find right now. I'll also link to after this live, but we're just here to answer the questions that you've all submitted to us and really kind of walk through the specifics of what really happens in the 4th trimester. So should we dig in?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So pregnancy is obviously 3 trimesters. Really, what is the 4th trimester? Define that for us.
Well, I think the 4th trimester can be defined in a number of different ways. I would say, simply put, it's the idea that after a baby or babies are born, both the person who has just had the baby and the babies that are in the world are still going through a developmental shift and process. Mm-hmm. And I think really in other cultures around the world, outside of the US, there's a lot of clarity that there is still this kind of huge transition that's going on. And there's a lot of practices to kind of help support that transition for the birthing person or parent or mother, and for the baby. But the idea really is that there's so much that still has to happen. And there needs to be kind of a path forward, kind of shaping that transition. So, once the baby's out, it's not done. Your body is still healing. The baby is acclimating, coming out of a very consistent, environment. That's one thing we don't think about when we think about the uterus. And we think about babies, there's a lot of like external focus on how the mother or person's body is changing and the expectant, excitement around the actual birth. But what we don't think about is the fact that the baby has been in this pretty consistent environment, consistent temperature, noise, light. And now they're coming into this world where it's just like noisy and loud and all kinds of different temperatures, and their body is like learning to do all these things. And for a person who's just had a baby, their body has just gone through all of these, transformative shifts to help let this baby into the world. So, the fourth trimester is all about acclimation, and rapid healing, rapid acclimation and rapid healing. And so I think that's really important to hold, because most people don't think about that. And there's just like, I just want to get through the pregnancy and have the baby, and then I can do. And it's actually more like you just want to get through the pregnancy and have the baby so you can learn and heal,
Yeah. I love that. So especially in those first 2 weeks, it's pretty intense, right? You're this new organ that you've grown, and a baby have left your body, and your body is really trying to get back to some semblance of where it was before. It'll never be the same as before, but let's talk about what kind of happens in that period. And the first and probably the maybe most obvious is bleeding. You're going to bleed after. How much? How long? What should we expect there? And when should we feel concerned?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And yes, you do end up bleeding sometimes anywhere from up to 6 weeks, anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks after birth. And the reason for that is during the pregnancy, your body, usually a pregnant person's body, will develop around 50% extra blood in order to nourish the needs of the baby in order to develop. And so, as that's happening, that blood eventually needs to also leave the body. So it leaves over time, as the rest of the kind of remaining lining of the uterus continues to shed. And that bleeding is called lochia. And what's interesting about the bleeding is it really should go from a larger amount, maybe seeing, kind of within the first week after having a baby, maybe under the size of, say, like a cherry tomato amount of blood kind of passing out of the body the way that you would have experienced, say, your period kind of passing out of the body, really happening on its own, usually with little to no pain. I'd say maybe in the first few days postpartum, that bleeding might be connected with some contractions kind of in the lower part of the abdomen. As your uterus is contracting back down, you're really going to feel maybe more of those, like I said, those lower, more lower set contractions. But, that amount of blood, starting out being more of a dark red color, moving into like a lighter red, moving into pink and then brown, and then eventually moving towards like the color of your like normal discharge is what's going to happen over those first few weeks. What you don't really want to see is large amounts of blood, right? Mm-hmm. And so large amounts of blood would be, soaking through more than one pad an hour, is really going to be something to want to check in with your care provider about. And you will be using a pad. So if I just said a pad, you're like, oh, I never use pads. You will be using a pad postpartum, because there is, it's contraindicated to insert anything into that part of the body until adequate healing has taken place. So you're really going to be, you're going to be in very close contact with blood and fluids, which I think is kind of an important thing to call out. Some people, some women will experience an increase in discharge in the third trimester anyway, and so they're kind of starting to acclimate with things feeling a little bit more ushy-gushy, but it really continues postpartum. And so, you know, I really like to couch that for a number of different reasons, because I think in our culture, you know, women are just like, you have your period, it's just something you have to go through, and you're just kind of like, suck it up and don't, you know, worry about it. But when you have your period, it's usually for about 5 to 7 days, right? It's like 5 to 7 days of pad usage, tampon usage, menstrual cup usage, and you keep it moving, right? But when you are postpartum, it's like 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks of wearing a pad, a panty liner. So, you know, if you don't like that, you know, that bulk in your underwear and it makes you feel uncomfortable, I want you to think about that. And then also think about the fact that you might be feeding a baby, trying to feed yourself, healing your body. And so I'm only kind of nesting all of these different experiences off the back of just one question, because that's really what the postpartum experience can feel like. It's like there's so many new experiences happening simultaneously, which is why awareness that these experiences are going to stack is so important. And then having the support to kind of interject inside of that is really important, because when we kind of ladder out of that and think about it, you know, that's how we protect the mental health, right? The mental health of the mother, the parent, the family is by like this deeper awareness of like, it's going all the way down to the fact that she's wearing a pad for 4 weeks. Like, that's uncomfortable. You know, like if that was the only thing that was going on, it would be uncomfortable, let alone everything else that's coming, right? So that's kind of the type of thinking we try to encourage people to do at Loom. It's like, think of this small thing, and then I want you to back out of that and stack up everything else that this person is experiencing, and then decide what is the right intervention, which is why, you know, in the article, I think I talked about the fact that more is more. Like, you can't have enough support postpartum, because you've probably never had this much happening to your body at once. And so you want to have all these options to be able to kind of dig into.
And I hear you saying, you know, the more support, the better, especially in these COVID times. It's like really hard to get that in-person support. Like, how would you say, you know, for somebody that's, doesn't have immediate access to a parent figure, sisters, a village, really, in this time, like, how would you kind of counteract that?
You know, it's a great question, Kathleen. You know, it's so kind of, I think, supportive right now, given even just these, you know, past, I say 7 months or so since we've had vaccines. It has kind of created a little bit more flexibility around what does it look like to bring someone into your home that is not a biological member of your home, but is someone who can assist you in helping you to take care of your family. And so it's really about thinking about COVID protocols, you know, understanding, is the person that's coming in willing to be vaccinated, has been vaccinated, ideally, hopefully, yes. And, you know, are they open to rapid testing? You know, what does their kind of, you know, pod look like? These are all questions that really are important to dig in on. And I think, you know, in many ways are an opportunity for us to just develop our, you know, our language around consent, because that's really so much of what these conversations are about. Like, would you consent to do this so that I can consent to have you in my home, and I can consent to have you take care of my child, you know, etc. So I think that's one thing, because I know you brought forward, if you can't have support because of the pandemic, I think my recommendation would be get comfortable with these more uncomfortable situations around consent and vaccines. If you really are not ready to do that yet, and you are still thinking about, I want to really hunker down, I want it to just be like, you know, the immediate biological environment, biological family in the environment, I mean, I would really say, you know, kind of upskill your family. Let's get everybody reading, you know, The Happy Sleeper, Happiest Baby on the Block, you know, all the really great kind of postpartum parenting related books, and kind of put people to task. We like to say at Loom, like, our pregnancy and postpartum program is not just for pregnant people and mothers, it's for anybody who's going to be supporting them. So you can kind of get everybody on the same page about what the needs set are going to look like, and, you know, and be able to kind of dose out like what everybody's going to do as the baby is coming forward. Because I really think most family members want to be helpful, and I think culturally, at least in America, help means like just coming over, sitting around, and like maybe asking to hold the baby. But in other cultures, in African cultures, you know, Latino cultures, you know, Asian cultures, there are things to do. There are soups to be made. There's laundry to be done. There is all these, So I think, if you're not familiar with those things, the best way to kind of build that culture in is to do a lot of like research ahead of time, education, preparation ahead of time to figure out, okay, like here's what we're going to need.
Yeah. Yeah. And even just talking to friends or talking to people online, like what were really, especially that are kind of in your cultural circle, what were the gaps that you really experienced? And just ask around to know, okay, I should probably think about preparing for something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's true. I think, asking your community and asking them to be honest about like, okay, what didn't you have? Like, what were you missing? And being able to kind of plan out from there.
Yeah. Sometimes we think like, oh, well, my mother had a baby. My mother had me. Like, she knows exactly what to do and how to do it. And, there's so many people that want to be helpful, but also need the guidance to understand what being helpful means to you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that was a question about bleeding.
It's not always about the bleeding. The bleeding is where it starts. And then there's all these other pieces that, connect on to it.
Yeah. And before we move on from bleeding, I did want to ask, is the expectation of bleeding the same for a vaginal birth and cesarean, or is there like a difference there?
They are the same because the idea is whether your baby's delivered out of or born out of your vagina or it is, taken out from your belly, the uterus is still going to need to remove and release that lining. So that's going to take place either way. And I think that's a great question to ask because oftentimes there is this idea that a cesarean birth is going to let you, kind of meander away from some of these kind of unavoidable physiological experiences. So you will still bleed.
Yeah. Speaking from personal experience, the changes that caught me by most surprise were the changes in my breasts when I had a baby. Let's talk about that. What are you expecting to happen with your breasts shortly after you give birth?
Yeah. So let's start off with some gentle anatomy because I think that actually is one of the more important things. So, when we think about breast tissue, we just think kind of frontal part of the body, you have two breasts, one left, one right. But breast tissue actually is pretty cool and it extends to some other places in the body. So, it extends all the way up the armpit. Kind of into what they call the auxiliary area. And so sometimes as you are experiencing breast changes, especially within the first few days postpartum, maybe the first 10 days, when your milk volume increases, keep in mind you already have enough milk to feed to your baby within the first 0 to 3 days of life upon birth, unless you've had, corrective surgery or like actual breast tissue removed. And that's because newborns need only about a teaspoon per breast per feed. So there's not that much that they need. What they need is rapid, constant kind of offerings, which is where kind of the exhaustion sets in if you don't know to expect that. But backing it up, as your milk volume does increase, there's a lot of fullness that can happen in the breast, which is really normal actually. And I say normal, not to say something is abnormal, maybe a better word to use is common. It's common for that to happen. But what is more challenging is if you don't empty the breast regularly, so, at least every 4 hours, maybe a little less than that, the breasts will get too full with milk and will harden. And that becomes really challenging for a baby if you are choosing to feed with your breasts or chest to be able to get on the nipple. Because if this is a breast and this is the nipple, let's say this is the nipple, this is the breast. As the breast gets fuller, the nipple just continues to retract into the breast, so it becomes hard for the baby to get on. And then as the breast gets relieved, whether that's through hand pumping or the baby feeding, the nipple kind of comes back out and everts. So you really want to make sure that you are keeping the breast as empty as possible and feeding the baby on demand, which can look like I said, can be every like 30 minutes putting the baby to the breast, just try and see if the baby will latch and engage, or at least making sure that 4 hours don't go by without some type of stimulation, whether that's from a hand pump or from a hospital grade pump. If you can keep that empty drainage happening regularly, you're going to have engorgement which is the fullness. Like you might feel like your chest has a fever. Like that's kind of the way it feels like when your breasts start to fill up.
Yeah.
But that's actually fine. That's what we would expect. Like if the hardest symptom is like feeling that heat and that like heaviness in the chest, great, because that's on target. That's what we're looking for. But when you're not emptying the breast regularly, that's when we get into the overfilled feeling, that hard feeling, and you can even feel kind of bumps and kind of what they call nodules in the breast, which are just filled with milk. So it's really about, I like to say sometimes with feeding, whether you're feeding from your breast and breastfeeding, chest feeding, or you're deciding to exclusively pump, it's really about 30 days to like build that habit. It's a very intense discipline process. Again, I wish a lot, and this is how we talk about feeding, in our program at Lumen and Loom in general, is like, it's literally preparing to breastfeed or preparing to pump. Because, if you ask yourself like when, and I think we talked about this maybe last time when we connected, for a live, but when is the last time you had to do something every day, 10 times a day for half an hour to an hour, whether you wanted to or not. And that is feeding, whether you are doing it, you're doing it at the breast or you're pumping or giving formula, that the consistency and the repetition of it. And so we really like people to know ahead of time, like prepare for that so that you can make sure you can stay on top of that kind of feeding flow to make sure that your breasts are getting full and feeling like heavy and dense, but not feeling hard and painful, and leading to things like blocked ducts and mastitis.
Got it. And if, there are a variety of reasons why you would formula feed immediately. Let's say you're on medication or you're just, that's your choice. Your breasts are going to get full. It sounds like they're going to get hard. And then what do you do? Like, what do people do when they're just going to exclusively formula feed, but they're physiologically creating milk?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I'm so glad you're bringing it up because I feel really passionate about supporting people and women wherever they're at, whether you want to feed with your breasts and breastfeed, you want to, exclusively pump, wherever you're landing on the spectrum, I'm really just like plus 1,000, because I think what we always have to remember is like living inside of a female body or identifying that way. And having the experience that we have being in this environment in a patriarchy, not feeling really safe to do a lot of things in the world, wanting to have that decision and ownership, within your body, I think is so important. So, for whatever reason that you're deciding to not breastfeed and you would like to formula feed, what happens in this area? So there's a couple ways to look at that. Your body, as soon as your placenta is delivered, whether that's vaginally or that's surgically with a cesarean birth, that's when your body says, okay, there's no more baby in here. We now need to start making more milk, but we're going to need an aggressor. Basically, we're going to need somebody to tell us we need to do that. So if you're pretty sure, like, this is not happening for us when this baby is here, then you really just do not engage this area at all. No manual stimulation, maybe doing a slight bit of hand expression to just take the edge off. You also might get recommendations from your care provider. And this would be a plan if you're planning to wean upon birth. You'd want to work pretty closely with your care provider to help kind of like titrate, like what are the interventions that we're going to need. The one is firstly, just don't turn on the machine. No stimulation. But they might recommend something like, Sudafed, which is like a decongestant that you would use if you were stuffy, but it dries out all the sinuses in the body. But those sinuses are also in the breast as well, which is another reason why it's so important if you have like really bad seasonal allergies and you're like a big Allegra or Zyrtec person. You want to keep that in mind because it can not, what's the best word to use here? It can create some problems with the milk supply if you don't realize that it's on top, it's in the mix of things. So something like that might be recommended. There are also other medications that can be helpful to just like accelerate the process. But what I want to say too is if you are choosing to not breastfeed and you want to wean upon birth, which is such a good thing to actually do more writing about, might be something we should do for like just a longer kind of piece about that. Just because I've seen it so many years, over the years in my practice, working with people who had a lot of complex feelings around feeding, but just wanted to know all the options if they wanted to take like a different path. But as I was saying, you don't want to turn on the machine. But you also don't want to deny you and the baby of skin to skin time. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because actually just having the baby right here at that midline of the chest in between the breasts can increase your milk supply. It still turns on the machine. The machine's like, you sure? You don't, well, I don't know. So if you're going, so I really want to be conscious of that because it's such an important place for the baby to thermoregulate, meaning babies aren't great at keeping themselves warm when they're born. So, you know, you really want to, they want to be there. You want them to be there. They regulate their heart rate there. They regulate their glucose levels there. So it's just kind of this like, you know, soft kind of balance there. Breast binding can also be a helpful thing to do on top of that. Again, with the guidance of a care provider. And again, you know, even if you're like just playing with the idea as a, like maybe you've never heard of this ever. And exactly like this person, you just said, okay, I didn't know that. If you're not thinking about it and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, like maybe this might be something I want to do. Don't wait till like the baby's out and then within 24 hours you want to try it. Let's talk about it ahead of time. Get in touch with a lactation consultant. Say like, look, like these are the things I'm thinking. I'm kind of wanting to move in this direction. What would this look like? So that, you know, you can have that preventative plan kind of built in ahead of time.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Let's talk about our vaginas.
Let's do it.
Hot topic.
All day, every day.
I'm loving the Loom Instagram. If you're not following Loom HQ, they're just going for it, talking about those hot topics in no apologetic language, and I love it. You know,
yeah,
it's great. So follow. But vaginas, what is going to happen? I think this is the number one question. People are terrified of tearing. What's likely to happen in birth if you deliver vaginally, and how should we care for our vaginas after birth?
Well, I think it's a couple of different things. So our bodies are kind of self-sufficient organisms, right? So we're programmed to figure it out. So if something happens to the vagina, the body, with all its intelligence, is like, let's send all the things down to the vagina to figure out how to make it happen, right? So I always like to say that because, you know, we're in this time where it's like, what's the solve for that? What's the thing to that? What do I need to buy to fix that? And this and that. So you don't always need something to do something. But what I do think is important to keep in mind is with a vaginal birth, there is going to be, you know, it's a big event happening down there. There's a lot of stretching and movement and kind of weight that's kind of moving through that area. So most people, even if they have a very kind of like normal birth, you know, nothing particularly out the range of normal happening, there probably will be some, you know, skid marks or grazing or tearing, you know, in the vagina. Now, you know, keep in mind, the vagina is really amazing in the sense that the vagina is inside. So the vulva is the entire kind of genitalia of women or anyone who identifies that way. And then, you know, inside of the vulva is the vagina. It's the orifice. Inside of the vagina, it's really moist. So I think that's super important to keep in mind. So it's like the inside of your mouth, right? So if you've ever like burnt the inside of your mouth, cut the inside of your mouth, like, you know, chewed your cheek or something like that, you know that healing process is very different than the healing process, like if you skid your knee, right? Where there's like a lot of exposure to air, the skin gets tight, crusty, all of that kind of thing, right? So, you know, most of the tears that are going to happen for, you know, in the first degree area are happening inside of the vagina, like inside of the vaginal walls, as opposed to, say, outside, which is where we're kind of in third and fourth degree tear area, which is much more unusual to have that experience. So the idea is to really, at the very least, expect some discomfort and some grazing or tearing, first degree internal, swifter healing process. It's a moist environment if it's happening inside. If we are in that kind of like third and fourth degree area that's outside into the perineum, into the muscle, into those kind of deeper areas, very different process, more external exposure, you know, more limited range of movement, more possibility for long-term pain. So there is a range, but the more common range is that first and second degree area. Now, in terms of afterwards taking care of the vagina, I think it's really important to make sure that when you're peeing, especially if there's any stitches that are done, that you don't just free pee, right? And so by free pee, I mean, don't just sit on the toilet and just like let her rip, 2-3 days after having a baby. If there is any open skin or any wounds in there, it'd be the equivalent of you having like 10 cuts in your mouth and then just being like, I'm just going to take a big glass of salt water, just put it in. That is exactly the sensation, but reversed, right? So the idea, you're just like, I'm moving away from the screen. That was not feeling good for me.
No, I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
No. But I mean, just the sensation, I mean, it's pretty visceral. I was trying to create something that would like make you feel like, how's it going to feel? Yeah. So, because basically most people have never had a tear in the vagina until they have a baby. So you're not like, oh, I remember how those tears feel. Like, it's like when I got this thing, it's like, no, there's actually there's no comparison. So we try to draw comparisons to things that would make some kind of, that would cause a little light bulb to go off. So the idea is to make sure you have a peri bottle, which I wrote about in the piece. Don't be scared, Maritzia. It's totally going to be okay. The idea is, so let's talk about how we help with that. Yeah, so right. When you're peeing, you should use a peri bottle, which is like a squeeze bottle that you can turn upside down. A couple really great brands. There's a couple great brands that make them. Frida Baby's one of them. Bodily makes them. And you'll actually spray that water, that warm water, preferably as you're peeing, so it dilutes the sodium and like the uric acid in the pee, so that when it's flowing over your vagina and vulva, it's diluted so it doesn't burn. So it's small things like that to know, to just like your peri bottle just lives on top of your toilet or on a little tiny cute little seat maybe that you put next to the toilet for probably about 10 days. That's usually how long you need it for. By then, again, keeping in mind that tissue heals really rapidly. You might still feel like pain or like kind of tension or discomfort in the tissue as you move or as you walk or as you poop, which we can, it's actually not that tricky to do simultaneously, Simone. It's actually even worth trying to practice while you're still pregnant. Because it's actually quite easy. In other cultures where they don't use toilet paper as much to clean themselves, it's the idea of, just like spraying water to clean. And if you find it a little odd, the idea of a peri bottle, some homes still have like a little bidet built in. Same thing. If you have a bidet already hooked up to your toilet, you don't need a peri bottle. You just need to like spray and pee is the other way to do it. And a lot of companies now, like there's Tushy. That might be something maybe add after the fact to the piece. Kathleen has like a Tushy is another option because like Tushies are great for everybody. And if you could even get one of those like Japanese Toto toilets built in that like spray you and dry you and do all of that. That's another option. I'm glad. I love it when people are like, I don't know about that. I'm like, well, I have 4 other options for you.
In the great toilet paper shortage of 2020, we bought a bidet and we like an add-on, just buy it off of Amazon. Yeah, it's exactly. Like Tushy, but
whatever. Yeah, totally. So there's a lot of options. We all got creative last year. So that's one of the ways it's going to be supportive to help in those early first few days. And then, kind of going forward, I know there's a question that came up about like how sex is going to feel. And so cleaning as opposed to, just so I can wrap up with Simone. So like in terms of wiping afterwards, the idea actually is to just like sit for a little bit and just let some air like run over. I have kind of like some underwear best practices postpartum, is, especially in those first few days, you are going to be bleeding. So you might find like as you pee and you kind of create that pelvic pressure to urinate, there might be a little bit of lochia and blood that comes out at the same time. So it's really just like let yourself air out, and you can use a bit of tissue paper just to pat dry after. But, peeing is something that might take a little bit longer postpartum as well. Like sometimes, like the urge to urinate in the first few days can be a little funny. It's kind of like staticky, not the feeling, but just like, do I have to pee? I don't know. And then you go sit down at the toilet and then you're just like, you like really have to pee. So that's a very common thing that can kind of happen postpartum. All these little things I'm talking about too usually get resolved within the first kind of 10 days or so. But I would say to you, pee breaks are a great time to say, hey, can someone be with the baby while I go pee? Because your pee might be 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. 7 minutes of it peeing, the other 20 you just being like, my time by myself for a few minutes before you have to go out and, you know, flow into the whole, you know, kind of parenting dynamic again. And conversely, the other thing I would say is learning how to baby wear really early postpartum. Wearing like a soft wrap is so helpful, because one of the first things I would always teach my clients was just like, put your baby in a baby wrap, and then you can pee and your baby can still be on you. It's fine. Yeah. Everybody's good here. Like, you know, and like, especially when the baby is falling asleep and you're like, I need to pee, but I want to put the baby down. Like, what do I do? And you don't want to like bring the like little swing or bassinet into the bathroom with you, and it's like on the floor. Baby wear and pee can be a really supportive piece as well.
Yeah, love that. I'm just going to name like a personal thing that I went through with the peri bottle, was that when I had to pee, like I couldn't get my water to heat up fast enough. So in the morning, I would like pour a carafe of hot water and just let it get to room temperature eventually. And room temperature was fine enough. But like, you know, cold water is tough, you know? Yes. So, and like when you have to pee, so have that at least room temperature water sitting there for you to fill your peri bottles.
100%. And I'm so glad you're telling me this story, because it reminds me of a client that I worked with many years ago who also was very temperature sensitive. But to your point, cold water is going to restrict the blood down there. So you want to really have warm water to just like ease everything and the blood flow and all that. But she was very temperature sensitive with the peri bottle, and actually liked using it for a long time after, you know, kind of into the first couple of weeks. So we actually bought a baby bottle warmer into the bathroom. Yeah. And then put the peri bottle in the bottle warmer and just like left it in there, because then it was always the temp that she loved. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. That was a really good call out.
I think this is like a product that needs to be marketed.
I mean, someone needs to figure it out. Yeah,
right. That was a big problem for me. Okay, yeah, wow. I hear that. All right. Okay. Let's see. What were we talking about? Oh, vaginas. Okay. Let's move on to vaginal delivery specifically, and then we'll get into C-section. But what should we expect out of our midsections, our bellies? And what's the best way to care for our bellies postpartum? Should we be binding ourselves? You know, what's the best way to handle that?
Yeah, you know, so I really think it's important to understand that, you know, while you are pregnant, your baby is growing, but your uterus is stretching. And so it's stretching to like move everything out of the way. And by everything, I mean your stomach and your intestines and all of these things that have like helped you for years and years, moving them out of the way to make way for the baby. So after the baby is born, the uterus is kind of like a deflated balloon, just kind of like hanging around. So this is the uterus, this little thing here. And like all around here are all the organs. And it's starting to do this, kind of making its way back down into your pelvis, back kind of close to where it used to be, which is at the bottom of your pelvis, about the size of a pear. That's kind of where it's going. So as it's, you know, involuting, which is what that's called, the organs are trying to like find their way back to like that natural setting that they were in prior to the pregnancy. And so belly binding can be helpful to like usher and support that process. Really, you know, belly binding also, just like from a constitutional perspective, and everybody has like a different perspective about this. I think sometimes binding can feel good because it makes you feel more collected. It actually has nothing to do with vanity, nothing to do with like getting your body back, whatever the hell that means. It's more about just like comfort, because you were so stretched. And then all of a sudden, the thing that was holding that tension is gone. So it feels, you can, without binding, you can feel a little like uncentered, actually. And so that like connection and that cinching is just going to help you feel that tension that you were used to feeling for so long, you know, kind of positive tension too. At a certain point in the pregnancy, that extension starts to just, your body learns to accommodate it. And it's spent 9 months building to accommodate it, and then over like 24 hours, 48 hours, it's gone. So you're basically trying to help support your body through that rehabilitation process. I also think what is going to be helpful with belly binding or just helping your midsection in general is lying down. Lying down is going to help with that ushering and getting everything back to where it needs to be in terms of the organs. Standing up, leaning over, washing dishes, like doing a lot of different things is not really in support of that, like, you know, kind of like reclining and like, you know, aligning that needs to be happening. So if you are going to be in the position where you're still doing a lot of housework, which many moms and people and parents on here may be and will be, really giving yourself that abdominal support will make that a little bit easier. But really postpartum, expect to have your belly still feel very soft and feel pretty extended. And it's going to be like that for at least, you know, 2 months postpartum, and it's absolutely fine. It's nothing to really worry about. And, you know, in many ways, I think we just live in a culture that's so obsessed with flatness and flat abs and all of these things. No, fajas are not bad for you after birth. Fajas, I believe is a Spanish name for binding. And in terms of lying down, that's a great question. How long should we do it for? You know, there's a kind of an old midwife's recommendation of like 5-5-5, right? So after birth, you know, you want to spend kind of 5 days in the bed, you know, getting in and out to pee, getting in and out to shower. Then you want to spend 5 days in the bedroom, just like in there. That's all you're doing. You're just like in the bedroom. Things are brought to you in the bedroom. You're really here. And then you want to spend 5 days in the house. Then you're like in the house. You're doing other things. And then after that, like leave. Do other things outside of the house. But like if you can do those first 15 days with that kind of graduated, and you might be like, how am I gonna do like 5 days in the bed, 5 days at home? Having a baby is the most like catalytic experience. It feels like 5 days goes by like this. You don't even know it's been 5 days. You know, all the hours merge together. And so if you can be really super conscious about how you spend that time, it's really going to be for your improvement. Because like, again, we have to always tie it back to the culture. We always have to tie it back to this like culture of productivity, culture of externalization, culture of like do. So you're gonna be like, okay, baby's here, now I gotta like no, it's actually supposed to be baby's here, slow down to speed up though. That's the thing. If you do this like 5-5-5-5, you will be more ready to like do all kinds of things in a shorter period of time, as opposed to trying to act like you are still constitutionally the same after having a baby when you are absolutely not. So that would be my recommendation. It's less about like finding your belly and actually just like slowing down, taking time, getting horizontal, and making sure that you're like eating and, you know, and getting a lot of, you know, close time with your baby and having some kind of support, whether from partner, family, friend.
Yeah. I heard this information, clearly did not absorb it when I had my baby. And, you know, like 7 days, I was like, I got to get out. Like, let's go on a walk. Let's go. Let's get out of here. And my body told me, no, like I came home, I bled quite heavily. Like it was not a good experience. So listen to your body, listen to the experts. It's not about just like, well, it's been 7 days. Let's get out of here. Around.
Yeah. And actually what you just brought up is also a really great thing for people to, you know, kind of internalize, is that your bleeding will tell you. So a really great way to know, like, okay, where am I in this like postpartum, you know, transition flow? Like, I think my brain feels like I'm ready. I got to get out of here. I'm kind of stir crazy, And then you get up, you go out, you do that thing. If you get home and your bleeding is just like, and maybe 2 or 3 days prior to that, it's starting to taper, seeming like there's like kind of, you know, on the way out, on the way up. If it increases after any activity that you've done, that is a like kind of, you know, like an internal survey of like, actually, we still need more time. Let's like dial that down. We're not ready for that yet.
Let's talk about post C-section, midsection. What's different about self-care after C-section?
You know, here's the thing. After cesarean birth, it's this question. No, it is not a funny question. It is serious. You're talking to the right lady. Yes. Loves her sheets. Loves her, you know, loves a soft thing. You know, I'm like in 2 minds about it, right? So again, I love this question so much. I'm going to like totally just like go like full flex on this. So here's my exact recommendation for you. you love sheets, put your favorite sheets on your registry, put them on your Babylist registry so that you can afford to get yourself your favorite sheets that may be messed up during your postpartum period. Because actually, you want your coziest sheets. You want like the best sheets. You want to be like, just like in the lap of bed luxury and not care what happens to that. Mm-hmm. So like sheets are maybe an under registered for item, and should be, because you will have night sweats kind of after the baby is born as your postpartum hormones acclimate. Yeah, someone's like, yes, but seriously, so that you don't have to be like, oh my gosh, like the baby came and then like I had to get expensive sheets. Like I got rid of my expensive sheets. And I didn't want to buy more expensive sheets because we're buying diapers all the time. Mm. So like, you know, it's a great thing to actually register for, and you want to be as cozy as possible. So that is my thought about that. But going back to, oh, I love these. That's such a good question. I'm all about like how do we get you both? How do we get you throwaway sheets that you love, and you can keep your old sheets that you love and not have to lose them. But in terms of cesarean births, you know, the healing postpartum, it's a similar thing. The same process in the sense of you know, after the baby is out, your body is still going to be healing and acclimating and doing all of that. So, you know, things to keep in mind though is that a cesarean birth is still major surgery, even if you are awake for it. There's a lot of like, kind of tension placed on the body, pressure, weight placed on the body that is not your own. A lot of the movements of the body during a cesarean birth, the tugging that's going to be having, and kind of just the manipulation by your care provider, are not what would happen if you were to have a vaginal birth, right? So it's important to kind of keep that in mind, that you might feel a sense of kind of like soreness through other parts of your body as well because of kind of some of the components of the surgery. You know, a binding would still be helpful. You would want to do that above the cesarean scar. And also scar healing, wound care is also going to be important as well, depending on whether you have been, you've got stitches or staples. Definitely really important to just talk to your care provider. If you're like, I'm having a cesarean birth, that's what I want to do. Really talk clearly with your doctor, who will also be your surgeon. You know, what is your typical surgical process? Do you do staples? Do you do, you know, sutures? And what is your aftercare kind of plan? Because keep in mind, your doctor's not typically going to talk to you about aftercare until after. And when you are already in the after process, you're kind of just like, okay, I heard you sort of, okay, I'll make sure. You want to really be thinking about, you know, aftercare beforehand. So you have all the things and pieces that you need. And binding would be a part of them, to just in terms of feeling that sense of collection, and helping with like, you know, fluid and swelling and all of that. And then, you know, after the scar heals, you know, scar mobilization therapy is actually really helpful too. Learning how to actually manipulate the scar up until 2 years after the procedure. You can really be doing massage work there to just help the kind of skin lay more flatly, to kind of like try to, you know, smooth out any, you know, any of the discomfort that adhesions might create, that are below where the procedure took place might be causing. So that's kind of, you know, my piece there. Everything else that we talked about in terms of belly care with a vaginal birth would still apply. The lying down, all of that. That said, after a cesarean birth, you know, lifting of things is a little bit more challenging. You might need help to lift the baby. You're actually also recommended to not really lift anything heavier than the baby until, you know, about 2 weeks or so, 10 days out, depends on your personal constitution. Also, cesarean birth, if you live in a 2-story house, you want to prepare to sleep downstairs, right?
Got it.
At least for the first kind of like 10 days, first week, then you can start to walk up and down the stairs. We do want you moving anyway, as they say, ambulating, walking around. That's going to help your gastric, you know, digestive system like click back on and do its thing, so you can poop and all of that stuff. They won't let you leave the hospital if you have a cesarean birth until you poop, but to keep pooping comfortably, you know, walking and doing that's going to help. Not too much, but just enough. But, you know, really, if you live in a 2-story house and you're having a cesarean birth, that's right. Yes. And the bed is the next place I was going to go. And the next place is if you don't have a 2-story house and you have a bed that is high, you're going to want to have a couch set up, or like a, you know, tatami kind of floor set up situation, so that you can do that, because that lifting of like getting your legs up and recruiting your abs to get onto bed It's very hard.
Yeah.
And then you start to have a lot of like bed anxiety of like, I gotta get up. That's gonna hurt. I don't want to get up. But the other thing I would then add on to this is pain management. You know, a lot of people feel like, oh, like I don't want to take my meds. Like I don't really ever take pain medication, or it doesn't make me feel good, or, you know, they have all these concerns about it. But the reality really about pain medication that I think people don't realize is that when you're not in pain, when those receptors are cut off, your body is more freed up to heal, right?
Yeah.
When you're in pain and it hurts, it's like, it's am I back?
Yeah.
It's really interfering with your body's capability to heal. And so when people are recovering from a cesarean birth, what we all know in the birth world, we like to say, stay on top of your pain meds. It's every 4 hours. You take your pain meds every 3 hours, 45 minutes, or every 3.5 hours. We don't even want to have the leak through of the pain. Now, the jump with that is if you're being really good with your pain meds and staying on top of them and you're not feeling any pain, you're gonna be like, I can get up, like I can do things. And that's not what we want. So we want a nice, if you are managing your pain well, it's not a free ride to just now do more things than you would. So I think really partners, you know, chosen family, whomever's going to be there supporting, good thing for you to keep in mind, just because she's done in pain, it's day 3 after a cesarean, well, let's say day 5, because you'll be home then, or maybe day 7. Between day 5 and 7 when you're home and you now are being good and taking your pain medications, and not to say you're being bad if you don't, but you're being compliant, and you feel like you have more energy, use that energy to just, you know, take it easy. Not as a license to, you know, try and, you know, rearrange the house or something.
Yeah, got it. You mentioned pooping.
I did. That's a great way to go out.
Yeah. What are some ways to make that first bowel movement easier? And what if you get constipated?
Well, it's not what if you get constipated. You will be constipated. That's actually the thing. So we just want to like go in with that expectation that postpartum constipation is a part of it, especially if you have a cesarean birth, because the bowels have kind of been, I like to say, like kind of tapped on and moved around as the surgery is happening. So you definitely want to take a stool softener. It's always offered to you postpartum, whether you have a vaginal or a cesarean delivery, just because we want to make sure that those things are kind of moving and grooving. But particularly with a cesarean, you definitely want to make sure of that. Also, you know, postpartum, if you've had a vaginal birth, that first poop can feel very intense, again, because of the muscles we are recruiting. So if my hands here are like the pelvic floor, right? You have like if this front part is like where the vagina is and the vulva is, and this back part here is where your rectum and your anus is where you poop. When you're pushing, you're recruiting your anterior pelvic floor muscles, so the muscles in the front to push the baby out. But you still are recruiting like muscles in the back too, like where the pooping is, or where the pooping happens. So everybody's like kind of working together, anterior muscles working the hardest. But when you poop, you kind of like you turn all the lights on again. And that feeling can feel like, whoa, like I'm about to use this whole group of muscles to do this thing I used to do all the time that I never really thought that much about, and might feel like, you know, more complex. So just preparing yourself for that first poop. I saw like the word chia come up, fiber foods, you know, drinking lots of water or drinking to thirst at least, like making sure you're not thirsty, drinking enough. These are all going to be things that are going to help it be easier for you to be able to go to the bathroom, because we really don't want to have constipation kind of you know, postpartum, especially if you're someone who is prone to constipation like throughout your life. A lot of people have like constipation complications over time. And in terms of how long can you take a stool softener after birth, I saw someone ask that question. It really just depends. You want to work with your care provider around that, but usually most people are doing it for the first week or so. Especially if they've had a cesarean birth. Sometimes some people don't even need it postpartum if they've had a vaginal birth, and you know, now that there's more like space, like their bowels kind of click back on sometimes too. And usually, you know, during a vaginal birth, because of all the cascade of hormones, you're kind of eliminating a lot. You're pooping kind of during pushing and a little bit, or you've pooped a lot through the whole labor, so you're pretty empty anyway. So it really can depend.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. I think we hit the whole list and we're coming up on the hour.
Boom,
and
boom.
Yeah, I I think I want to wrap with just one question that came, you know, it comes up a lot, especially around Babylist, which is like, you mentioned that the best support you can have is your village. If you could also prepare with products to kind of help, you know, what should I buy beforehand just in case? What would you suggest that, you know, we go out and prepare ourselves with to come home to?
Yeah,
specifically
absolutely.
to our postpartum bodies.
Yeah, I think for postpartum bodies, we talked about a peri bottle or getting like a little bidet tushy extension, or, you know, maybe going whole hog and get your house a Toto toilet seat.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you'll fight for bathroom time if that gets in. So maybe it's like in your special bathroom. But something like that are great. You know, I think great sheets are so important. We spend so much time in bed. I think also a great thing to register for is a new mattress. You know, a mattress that's like, you know, like an avocado mattress or a Kitsa mattress. You know, they're bigger ticket items, but they, it's just so nice to have a, you know, clean mattress with no plastics, no all these, you know, that might be something. It's a funny thing to say, like, get that postpartum, but like a good bed is a great thing. Also new bed for new baby, like all the things. I think as well, you know, beyond that, you know, making sure you've got good kind of menstrual hygiene products. So, you know, in the article I talked about a period company that has great reusable period underwear that would be great for that period of time. You know, belly binder from Bodily is going to be important. They make my favorite one. I just love how like adjustable it is. And also I love that it's gray and it's like very minimal. Really good nursing bra, whether you are, you know, exclusively pumping or breastfeeding, that's going to be super important. And finding one that makes you feel comfortable. I think really starting to look for, you know, your bras around 36 weeks is going to be great. Primarily just because your ribcage expansion has kind of fully happened then. So we're kind of at full tilt in terms of change. Your breast change is not at its full capacity, but we're kind of in a position where it's going to be a good time to shop. In terms of brands, I love everything from, you know, Pansy is really great. It's an organic brand of bras. It's actually not even really nursing bras, or just like organic. And the reason why I feel really strongly about thinking about organic underwear first for up here is just because your skin is your largest organ. And it's like absorbing everything. So you want to try to put like the best possible things on your body that are available. And so Bambooby is great too. Love Bambooby. Medela makes some great bras. So does Bodily. Stork, S-T-O-R-K.
Q, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Q.
That's like Stork with a Q at the end. Yes.
Yeah.
They make amazing bras. Also amazing like pajamas, like cozy, comfy things. That is really going to be something I would say. Definitely have things that unbutton or zip. For clothes for you, because if you are feeding or exclusively pumping, or even just formula feeding and want to get down to skin energy really quickly with your baby, you just want to go like that and not have to do this and all of that. Things that unbutton and zip are going to be great too.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else. There's so many things. I feel like I think we put a lot of good stuff into the article, but I think those would be kind of like my top things that would be helpful. Yeah.
And I would say from an experience standpoint, something that was helpful for me, if this is available to you, is I co-opted our guest bathroom. No one was allowed in it except me. All my stuff was out. My partner used our main bath and whatever, and no one was allowed into the guest bathroom for at least a couple weeks, so that I could just like have everything I needed all in the place that I wanted it to be.
Don't move anything.
Was because you'll spend a lot of time there. So
I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I think, I mean, another conversation we can have maybe is just, I have a whole like kind of policy around sleep postpartum, like sleep hygiene. Because I do think there's actually value in like the mom having her own room with the baby that's like perfectly the way she likes it, and like she can have visitors, like partner can come in some nights, but partner can also get some sleep in a different room so that feeding can happen in the partner that's not biologically, because your body, if you're choosing to feed with your body is biologically wired to kind of join your baby in these shorter sleep cycles, and you know, your breasts and chest are making that milk to feed the baby. But the person who hasn't had a baby is like, my body's not doing that. You know, there is some adjustment like psychologically, but you know, they're not going to be as accommodating about the short sleep cycles and all of that. So you know, I think there's a whole conversation to be had around like why it's okay to plan to maybe sleep in separate rooms for a couple of weeks postpartum with like very clear like parameters around support, so that you know the other partner can get good sleep and you can get the sleep that your body is kind of wired to do for the job that it's also having to do, but different combo.
Yeah,
different.
That is a great combo to have.
Yeah, because people feel a lot of
you.
we should that's the next thing we talk about, because a lot of couples have a lot of like kind of postpartum grief of just like, we don't go to bed at the same time, or like they're sleeping in another room and I feel bad. And it's like, no, it actually makes a lot of sense. She's like alone with they or like alone with the baby. Yeah, it's totally fine. It's a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, you don't want your partner to suffer just to suffer. You want them well rested so that they can be their best to help you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, sometimes we want our partners to suffer a little bit. I mean,
I can't speak to that. I know nothing about it, but I'm here to neutral support for both parties. I'm here on behalf of sleep. I'm here on behalf of the baby. I'm the mediator for the babies. I want everybody to get what they need.
I love that. Erica, it's so great to be here with you. I love these chats. I can't believe how long they go, and then I'm like, oh, it's an hour or whatever. So we're excited to have you back. This is not the last chat we'll have. If anybody has ideas that they want us to have conversations with Erica, DM us. You can DM Erica or DM Loom HQ, and we'll set those up and continue to have these great conversations about how you can be better prepared to bring a baby home. So after this chat, we'll put a bunch of links, supportive, helpful links, articles Erica has written, and her and Loom HQ's pregnancy postpartum course in our Instagram stories. It'll be under Loom X Babylist. Check those out, and we'll see you back here again sometime soon.
Thanks, Kathleen. So good to see you. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye.